Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. My name is Kat Kalashian. I am the Live and Invest Overseas Europe correspondent. I am based in Paris, where I am right here now. Today we're going to talk about the things that you'll wish you had known before you moved to France. 30 things that you really want to know before you make a decision about actually moving to France or not. Number one, Paris is expensive, but it's actually more affordable than you think. Certainly, it is an objective city, mostly because the rents are, sky high. But if you're, paying attention to where you're shopping at the local markets, and economizing in certain ways, especially for the fact that you don't need a car. That was one of my biggest expenses when I was living in Panama. When we moved to Paris, it cut out, I don't know, a huge 30% ish part of our budget. Public transportation is very affordable. So Paris can be more affordable than you think. Number two, the bread, the cheese, the wine, enough said. We don't really need to get into anything more there. The pastries, there you go. That was the last one. I need to remember all of the wonderful things that there are to eat here in France. Unless you're in Paris, you'll need a car. So if you're living basically anywhere else outside of the capital, you're pretty much going to have no choice but to own a car. However, number four, if you are in Paris or whenever you do visit Paris, please don't use a car. It's the worst way to get around the city and very expensive. The best way to get around the city is walking, and it's also the best way to explore and see this beautiful open air museum that I call home. But the metro, the buses, and the bikes are all excellent forms of transportation. I try and opt for walking and biking whenever I can. There are many bike sharing programs. The most popular is Velib. And if you have a Velib card, you can pick up a bike wherever you go, electronic or mechanic. And it's super affordable. Love it. Great way to get around the city because Paris especially is a very flat city. There aren't a lot of hills in France. In most French cities outside of the Alps. And Paris is definitely a very flat, navigatable city. If you're in the northern part of France, don't underestimate how dark it is, how far north we are. I think especially Paris is a lot grayer than most people think, and certainly anything really up north of the midway line of the country is very far, much farther north than I think most North Americans realize. And many months of the year you're not going to see a lot of sun. You'll get a lot of rain. But if you can put up with that with the four seasons, then the spring and the fall and the summer can all be wonderful. If you're in the south, of course, plenty of sunshine to go around. You don't really need to think so much about the fact that you'll be losing daylight hours and losing sunshine hours. I mean, at the depth of winter, there are only about 8 hours of daylight up here in Paris. So whatever, compare that to wherever you're living right now and think about how that might affect your life. Number six, protests. No matter what it is about anything, anywhere, anytime, the French love to protest. It is their right, their constitutional right to do so. Saturdays are the official protesting days. So if there are any ongoing riots, the Gilets jaunes riot, which was about pensions a couple years ago, those lasted, I think over a year, those riots. And every Saturday they would all get together in their yellow jackets and go out and protest. Occasionally there would also be a Thursday protest. Those have to be announced. So it's a very, very civilized system for protests because it is so ingrained into the society and the culture. They usually don't necessarily disturb your life unless it's a transport strike, which can be really, really, really affect your life very badly, especially if you're living in Paris. If you're not in Paris, maybe not that badly. Just keep a lookout in the newspapers and on the news for what your local protest day might be. 7, social media is the best way to meet expat friends, and there are tons of expats. There's a huge population of expats, especially in Paris, but all throughout the country. You just need to get online to find them. Huge contingencies in the south, and spread all across, but there are definitely pockets where there are huge Anglophone communities and huge foreigner communities and retiree communities. So get online, even if you don't like Facebook. just sign up or make a fake account or whatever you want to do just to meet other people in your neighborhood, because it really will be the number one way to meet people that that you will be living in your new home with. Meetup groups are another great one. That's an app, meetup groups, and just join any local organizations. So, there's women's associations, there are libraries, there are church groups, charitable groups, whatever the local Anglophone or foreigner based, expat based organization is, join it. Even if you're not necessarily interested in it in particular, it'll be a great way to meet new friends. Number 8, Amazon.fr is your friend. Make it your friend. It's often a lot cheaper to buy things there than it is in stores, and you'll end up spending days, weeks, even trying to go to all the different little boutiques all over to find the item that you need. Amazon may be killing the planet, but it really does make your life easier here in France. They have a great selection. And it's also a cool way for your friends back home to maybe send you a gift, because if they send you a gift from the States or Canada, you'll be hit with massive duties when you get it, when you receive it. So if you do want friends to send you gifts, make up an Amazon.com gift list and tell them to buy from, an Amazon.fr gift list and tell them to buy from that, and then you won't be hit with any taxes, and neither will they. Great selection, more selection than you'll usually find in a single place anywhere in France. Number 9, most buildings are old and inconvenient. On the one hand, this is charming and beautiful. On the other hand, it can be a real pain. Floors are uneven. Literally, there are parquet floors, hardwood floors, where a marble will just roll down every time. The office I'm sitting in fact, I usually have a wheelie chair in here, but I hate using it because I'm constantly sliding back. So I've opted for no wheelie chairs in this office anymore. But crazy kind of situations with walls, with insulation, leaks can be a really big problem in these old buildings. Ask anybody who's ever lived in France, and they'll tell you leaks are probably one of your biggest foes when it comes to living in French buildings. And stairs, if you're living in an apartment, especially in any of the cities, there aren't going to be elevators necessarily to take for granted. You might find them, sure, they exist, but it's not common. It's not taken for granted, and you do need to look for it. They're not equipped with things like central heating or central air. Again, it happens. You might find it, or you could get a place and do it yourself, but that's not typical. The French don't like climate control. They much prefer to live in the seasons naturally. So you can embrace that lifestyle, or you can get, a little mini rolling air conditioner or something. But my point is that you might be shocked, and you might not even be able to predict the ways in which living in old buildings, sometimes hundreds of year old buildings, can be quite difficult. So, really put your potential new residence, put it to the test drive before you make any big commitments. And maybe rent first. We always say this, rent first before you buy, no matter what. But rent in a couple of old buildings just to find out what the quirks are, and then apply that knowledge to when you're looking for something more long-term. Number 10, you can bring your pets to France easily if you're coming from the United States or Canada or most other countries, including Mexico, for example. They will need to be registered once you bring them here. It's a whole lot of paperwork, and it's quite annoying to do. I've done it myself with a dog and a cat, coming from a country that is not at all easy to export animals from. Panama it was. But coming from the US or Canada or Mexico or many other countries, any other European country, should be very easy. And just remember that when you land here in France, you will have to take them to the vet and get them registered in the local French system. And they'll receive a little EU pet passport that you can take when you take them on a plane or a train within the EU. And it has all of their health information in it. It's very convenient. Franglais or Franglish is probably a lot more common than you think. You can take a look at the screen. I'm not going to read through them all, but these are just some examples that I could think of after letting myself marinate on it for a day and walking down the street. You'll see so many of these walking down the street. The thing is, a lot of them don't actually mean what you think they would mean. So, for example, a jogging doesn't mean anything about jogging. It means a fitness suit, a track suit. A pressing is a dry cleaner, for example. What's another good one? A basket. Les baskets are tennis shoes. A casquette can also be, or a basket can also be a helmet or audio headphones. So A lot of these words, business, yes, that means business. Shopping means shopping. Chatter does mean to chat. To checker does mean to check. Un brushing, though, is a blowout from the hair salon. Shampoing is a shampoo, but it's pronounced shampoing. To scotcher is to tape something together from the word scotch or the name brand scotch. Hipster is a word that transcends all languages. So some of these do mean the same thing, but don't necessarily take for granted that they will. So, check things before you start using them in sentences. While we're on the subject of funny slang in French, oh la la does not mean what you think it means. Yes, it is an expression of not quite shock, a little bit less than shock, surprise, I guess. But it's usually always used in the negative. I rarely ever hear it used in the positive. And I think when I hear it in the positive, it's me or my family or another Anglophone using it in the positive. But usually if you hear a French person saying oh la la, it's with head shake and great disdain for whatever it is that they're talking about. There is no retiree visa program, but the minimum income required to qualify for residency is quite low, especially in European standards. So even if you are a retiree and you're looking at some of the most beneficial retiree programs that are out there in the world, don't cross France off your list out of hand. Yes, many countries do offer more benefits, but they're very rare to find that in Europe. You're mostly going to find that in Latin America or in Asia. Europe has started to create some competitive programs for residency and citizenship, but most of them are quite expensive. So they're not necessarily competitive. They're more competitive than they were when they didn't really want anybody to come in. But France doesn't have any of those kinds of programs, but it can be very easy and accessible to get residency here. So meet with a lawyer, discuss your income, your pension amount, and your particular situation. Odds are there is an easy route for you to gain residency here in France. 15. If you're an American, you can only, this is number 14. If you're an American, you can only be refused a bank account 3 times. This is very important because it's increasingly difficult for Americans to open bank accounts overseas. Some banks just refuse outright to deal with Americans. That's their policy. Here in France, the government has your back a little bit with that. So if you do get refused 3 times by banks because either they won't deal with Americans or, whoever is on the desk that day just doesn't like your dossier and they don't want to deal with you, whatever the reason, when you are in that meeting, you need to request a formal letter of refusal from the bank. And anybody in the bank who you're having a meeting with should be able to do this for you. They might mail it to you. They might email it to you. You might not get it on the spot, but it's a very easy thing. They might not be super familiar with it because it is a kind of particular situation for us Americans trying to get bank accounts overseas, but it's an easy thing for them to do. And once you've got 3 of those letters, you can present them to the Central Bank of France and say, look, I've done my part. Nobody is working with me. And then the central bank has to assign you a bank. Then you don't get a choice anymore, but you will get a bank account. So highs and lows. Number 15, quality over quantity in all things, no matter what it is: food, drinking, clothing, housing. A house can be magnificent, but much smaller in square footage or square area than you're used to. But the French are very much about quality over quantity. And it's something that I think they make fun of us for and we make fun of them for. It's kind of a cute little thing that is just a very, very huge difference in cultures that I think is pretty ingrained. Number 16, generally speaking, this is a pretty handicap-friendly country. I can't say that, it's not a blanket statement. Paris, for sure, is very handicap-friendly. You won't see a street without a ramp on it. All the buses are equipped to have a ramp that goes down. Metros, not so much, but you can get by using just the bus system. So that's an upside. Of course, cobblestone streets are nobody's friend. Even if you're, young and on 2 legs, they still hurt after a day of walking on them. So cobblestone streets are, not necessarily something that's mobility friendly. Outside of Paris and outside of big cities, you might have more trouble with ramps or, elevators for sure aren't a common thing here. But generally speaking, you can get by with some mobility issues here. Or if you're in a wheelchair, it won't be too hard to navigate. You will, of course, have to go and put in the research in the specific town or city that you're thinking about living and go through a day in the life. And of course, you're the only one who can answer that question if you're comfortable living there. But 17, that brings me to great infrastructure when it comes to road and rail networks. They're all fantastic. France is very intra-connected and also connected to the rest of Europe. You're really never going to have any issues with transportation. Trains can be a little bit expensive. They're not quite as affordable as they used to be. But public transportation is pretty ubiquitous throughout French cities and all European big cities. But public comfort is really the number one thing. And I think that's what it all boils down to with the infrastructure is, people want to, or the government wants you to provide you with parks and little playgrounds and areas that are beautiful and useful. And that all comes down again to the infrastructure and making sure people can get around comfortably, live their lives comfortably. Number 18, hiking, known as du rando, to randonner is to hike, and so they shorten it to du rando. So you might see that word around. It doesn't mean random; it means hiking. It's incredibly popular among the French. However, that's pretty much the only activity that the French really like to do when it comes to fitness. It's become a little bit more commonplace for people to jog or go to gyms, especially since COVID. But the French are not known for their fitness levels. They're known for, taking it easy, relaxing with wine and a cigarette. And so if you're really into athleticism, I'm not going to say you can't make it work here in France, but you might be lacking that community that you might have found in your other home. Number 19, there's a big difference between Paris and anywhere else in the country. There's a little bit of a joke that Paris is the first through fifth largest countries in France, that even the second largest city in France, even the second largest city in France is so much smaller than Paris that it doesn't count except for number 6 until you get to number 6. So it's, they're in terms of services, working hours, number of choices, diversity, even things like getting things delivered. Paris is really in a league of its own, which isn't to say Paris is super modern. For example, butchers here mostly close in the afternoon. So you can't go to the butcher between 1 and say 5 p.m. a lot of times. But that kind of siesta mentality is more common outside of the city and especially in the South. And that actually is the way a lot of businesses are run in the South on this siesta kind of timetable. So something to keep in mind if you're a go person, this is not New York City. Even Paris is nothing like New York City. It is not a 24-hour city, and you should get to know that right away. It's a great base for travel and within Europe and Africa, though. So if further travel is one of your goals, France is a great place. Even if you're not in Paris itself, it's not hard to get up to Paris from anywhere else in the country. Shopping is not at all what you're used to. Number 21, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about Paris even seeming a little bit provincial. If you're used to bigger cities in the United States, there are very few big box stores, very few department stores. The department stores that there are very high end, very niche department stores. So if you have a shopping list, you probably have to make 6 stops. I mean, that maybe at the height of your errand running. But at least 2 or 3 stops would be normal on any given day to get all the things that you need to do, or buy all the things you need to buy. So you'll go to the butcher, then the baker, and markets are still a really big cornerstone of communities here. So every arrondissement in Paris has at least one outdoor market that you can go to, and it's usually open 2 days a week, sometimes more. You can get all of your seafood, your meats, your vegetables, basically all of your grocery shopping you can do at these markets. And that is the way that most people shop, especially outside of the cities. Number 22, holidays are taken extremely seriously. I really love this about France. It's one of the things that I have come to realize more since living here as an adult. And I really, really appreciate the fact that, the French really protect their personal time. Work ethic is nothing like it is in the U.S. So that's true anywhere in the world. The U.S. has a very unique work ethic. Here, in fact, the work week is protected. You only need to work 35 hours per week. That's the minimum number of hours in a full-time job. And in some kind of unionized jobs, that might be the maximum number of hours as well. So very short days, leisurely lunches. People live to enjoy life here. It's the cliche about working to live versus living to work. And here, for sure, you see it every day in every aspect of the culture. People here, they work to live. That job is only a means to get by and have a good weekend, or have a good evening, or have a good summer, or have a good winter vacation, whatever it is. So I love the fact that your personal time, your home time, your family life, they're very protected, honored, and there's this very special appreciation for life here that I never really felt in any of the other places that I've lived. Number 23, you could go hiking or to the beach every weekend, even if you live in the city. Even if you're living here in Paris, you could manage to, well, I don't know, Paris, it's a bit far, and the Normandy beaches aren't so great, but it is feasible. You could go to the Normandy beach every weekend if you wanted to. It's not that far, if you had a car, especially, but also by train. But if you're living anywhere in the southern half of the country, this is definitely a huge draw for living there, is that you can live within 2 or 3 hours of the coastline to take weekend trips whenever you wanted. You can live within a couple hours of the mountains if skiing is your main, winter activity. You can live in the mountains, or you can live near the mountains, and you could locate yourself between the mountains and the coastline and visit each on alternating seasons, alternating weekends. So it's not necessarily an easy jaunt. I wouldn't say you could do it all in a day trip, but you could certainly make a weekend trip from anywhere in France to get to the beach or the mountain for the weekend. Number 24, English is not as widely spoken as you think, especially if anybody has seen Emily in Paris. It's one of the Netflix shows. Everyone in that show speaks English perfectly, but that is not at all the case. Even in Paris, the only places you can really count on English being spoken is in tourist neighborhoods, tourist restaurants, in the service industry, hotels, obviously. But you can't necessarily expect that you could walk into any store and that the salesperson will speak English. You have a better shot of it with people under the age of, say, 40, certainly under the age of 30. Even still, though, it's not guaranteed. Many countries in Europe have English as a compulsory second language, but France does not. So, people here might be learning Spanish or Italian or German instead of English. And there's really no obligation in the French system to learn English. So you might get lucky, but you can't count on it. Outside of Paris, it's very much a crapshoot, and it certainly depends on the tourist, the number of tourists that they're seeing. So if you're, going to Nice or Marseille or Cannes, these are places that see a lot of foreigners, and they're going to speak English, but can't necessarily count on that elsewhere. Number 25, I've kind of touched on this, but I call it the demain attitude instead of the mañana attitude. This is the mañana attitude of Europe, and it is a thing. Those siesta hours, the fact that you want to take a long lunch, the fact that you want to protect your holidays. There's no real urgency about anything here. Things can take a very long, frustratingly long time to get completed. For in another example, it's that the customer is not the king here. There's this attitude that, it's very laissez-faire. There's really no other term for it but the French term. They really couldn't be bothered if you're in a hurry, if you want to get your return done immediately, if you think the line is moving too slowly, if you think that the waiter has taken too long to come take your order. They're not concerned. And the more concerned you are, the less concerned they become. So the key, I think, in a lot of those scenarios, if you are feeling that frustration, is to just not let it show and to try and plaster on a smile. And that usually goes a lot farther. It's probably advice for anywhere in the world, but certainly with the French, you're not going to get anywhere. They will just turn into a concrete wall if you start showing emotion. Number 26. It's very difficult to make French friends, especially in Paris. It's a little bit easier outside of the city and the big cities in general, and also definitely outside of Paris. So in the countryside, in a more rural setting, in a more village or town setting, it's certainly going to be a lot easier. But it can be very hard. The way that Americans or North Americans, Canadians included, and the French, the way that they socially interact is so at odds with one another. And I'm still kind of coming to realization of this. I knew it always in the back of my head, but I'm seeing it in a kind of real time basis now that I'm living here and really, as an adult, really trying to make French friends. And the way, people really do here think that Americans are superficial for small talk, being friendly, being chatty, saying hello in the elevator. That's really looked down upon. It's not seen as being friendly. It's seen as almost being condescending. If maybe that's not the right word, but it's insincere. That's for sure what they think. I've talked to so many French people in the past couple of years, and they ask me, are Americans making fun of us or making fun of, are they sincere? There's no way they could be authentic or genuine in that level of friendliness, which of course we are. We're just being social the way that we normally are being social. But it is perceived so differently. And you have to flip that as well. The way that the French are behaving in their eyes is not at all seen as standoffish or cold or are at arm's length or whatever these other terms that you want to use are. It's just that's the way that they're taught to socialize. And it takes a long time to dig past that level of formality. Once you do, though, you've got a friend for life, and it's very hard to say offend someone so much that they would cease to be your friend here. But it does take a long time. It can be very difficult. So keep at it. I'm still plugging away at that one myself. 27, possibly the least business friendly culture in the world. This for sure is true. Live and Invest Overseas founders Kathleen Petticourt and Leif Simon were living in France before they founded Live and Invest Overseas in 2008. And when Kathy said to Leif, I want to start a business, Leif said, well, where are we moving? Because we're not staying here to do it. And for sure, the labor laws are incredibly employee friendly, which means they're not employer friendly. They're almost the absolute opposite extreme, the other end of the extreme from what an American labor law example would be. So, for example, here there's a probation contract that you can have for the first 6 months. And basically, if you can prove that within those first 6 months that you've shown up on time, you've been a good employee, if you don't get fired after that 6 months, essentially, it's almost impossible to fire you after that point. And so a lot of French companies will look for reasons to get rid of somebody before that 6 month mark. I knew a couple of people who got fired for other reasons, but it was clear that it was because they had just announced their pregnancy and were coming to the end of their 6 month probationary term. So something to be aware of if you are thinking about some kind of entrepreneurial undertaking, if you're thinking about, any kind of self-run business of any kind, it could be okay. But anything that's involving other people, hiring other people, excuse me, probably not a good idea to base yourself here in France for that. By the same token, landlord laws are in the favor of the tenant, not in the landlord. Another thing to keep in mind if you're thinking about investing here and possibly renting out on a shorter long-term basis. But if you are coming here to get to be employed in any way, the rights may be with you once you got a job, but it would be incredibly difficult to get a job as a foreigner here, and the kind of visa that you would have to get to do that probably wouldn't be the most favorable one. So definitely don't rule it out. I know many, many, many people, all of my friends are here working, but most of them were transferred from an American company over here. So that might be an option for you. If you currently have a job, if it's a multinational, you might talk to them about a transfer or possibilities down the line. But other than corporate jobs and corporate placements, I really don't know that many people who've been successful in coming to France and just finding local employment. It's not impossible. And I do know people who have done it. But I wouldn't say that it is a sure thing or the best environment to come to for if that's your main motivation. Number 28, on the other hand, France may not be business friendly. It is incredibly health friendly. By the World Health Organization standards, France has the best healthcare system in the world. I can attest to it myself. I gave birth here. I've raised a 2-year-old daughter. That means lots and lots of doctor's appointments and illnesses and vaccinations. During this COVID crisis, I think, there are a lot of ways that we could say that countries did good and bad. But what I think Europe and France in particular really excelled at was making testing immediately free and available to anyone at any time as soon as they were able to. I was shocked when I heard that testing was paid this entire time in the US and that it could take weeks in some cases to get tested. Here, you can go to the pharmacy, pick up an at-home test, do the tests at home. You can go to any pharmacy, any little tent. There are tents all over the city. Go in there and get a nasal test anywhere. And they've always been free. So, it's things like that the government definitely has this safety net for its population. And the healthcare is really a huge part of that. And if you are a resident and you are paying taxes here, if you're a resident not paying taxes here, that's a different story. There are many different ways to take residency. But if you are paying taxes, that means you are eligible to receive all of this healthcare, amazing healthcare for free. I will say that I have not been in the healthcare system since I've lived here for 2 years. As I said, I did have a child here. I've had plenty. I went through my entire pregnancy here. I have seen the doctor more in the past 2 years than I think I ever did in my entire life previously. But I was not in the healthcare system. I paid out of pocket for everything. My insurance company will pay me back or has paid me back for anything over my deductible. But I paid out of pocket and it has been incredibly affordable. My entire hospital's labor, everything all inclusive hospital stay was 4 days, by the way. In the States, it's only 1 or 2, I know. But I stayed 4 days. That was minimum for an absolutely normal birth. And we paid about 5,000 euros, probably less than that, actually. I'm rounding up. But, all inclusive, the entire pregnancy was for sure less than 10,000. I could probably include her first 2 years of life in that as well. So less than 10,000. And I have looked it up. I've talked to many people. You can't get out of a hospital with a baby in the US for under 16,000 bare minimum. Usually it's more like 30. So that just sorry for the little digression, but it gives you an illustration of just how affordable the healthcare is, and it has been great. You can go to the American hospital, the British hospital, or any of the wonderful French hospitals. So great healthcare. Definitely, if that's a concern for you, France should be top of your list. 29, the stunning landscapes and diverse geographies. Most people think of France and they think of Paris and the Riviera. But there's so much in between that. The Alps are fantastic. The Savoie regions, which are around the Alps, are some of my favorite places in France. The entire northern coast, and especially the Bretagne region, has this huge Celtic influence, which most people are totally unfamiliar with. I wasn't aware of it until I learned about it. So many historical sites, Roman sites, going back to Neolithic. Some of the most famous cave paintings in the world are here in France. Just so much varied geography to take advantage of, whether that's, whether you're into beaches or mountains or wild and windy coastlines that remind you of Scotland, or cities or small towns, villages. There's really any kind of lifestyle that you could want to pursue here in France. And the landscapes, no matter what region you're in, you want to just roll your camera along the entire time you're in the car or the train or walking or whatever it is. And number 30, finally, what are the top expat complaints that I've heard / have had? The administration, for sure, is number one. The French invented the word bureaucratie. So obviously they have perfected it. It is extremely frustrating to do anything administrative here. The paperwork is just out of this world. The good news is once you do the paperwork, nobody seems to really care about anything after that. You've just got to hand in a big stack of paper, hand them a ream. The bigger it is, the better, the more likely they are to rubber stamp you through, in my experience, off the record, of course. And difficulty making local friends is definitely the other number one thing. That's probably my second complaint as well. And for sure, one of the top complaints that I've heard. Luckily, France is full of many, many, many foreigners, expats, retirees, people working, people investing. And there are no shortage of friends to be made, whether they are English speaking or not. So there you have it, the 30 things that you need to know before you move to France. I hope it's been helpful and a little bit educational. I have been Kat Kalashian. Sign up for my bi-weekly newsletter, In Focus Europe. It comes out for free every other week to your email. Sign up here now. You'll get lots more great tidbits like this about all the countries that we love in Europe, not just France. Thanks. Bye.